One thing I've always loved about any series that I watch or read is when they go back and expand upon events that we may have only gotten little hints of in the past, or have only heard about through a character talking about their past, or about events that have happened to them, things along those lines. And we got just an instance in After the Fall when it comes to Team Coffee. Now, if you guys remember, back in Volume 2, just when Team RWBY was about to head out on their mission with Dr. Oobleck to Mountain Glen, we got a brief encounter with Team Coffee. They were coming back from a mission a week late, and we only got a slight conversation between Blake and Velvet, the extent of which being Blake asking, are you okay, what happened, and Velvet responding with, I'm okay, I had Yatsuhashi to look out for me. There were just so many. So many meaning so many Grimm. Now, this mission we get a little bit of an expansion upon in After the Fall. We find out what this mission was, what happened on this mission, why Team Coffee came back looking as defeated as they were, and it's, kind of a dark mission, at least what happened to them. There aren't many times in the RWBY series where you really feel the gravity of the situation. There have been times that I've cried throughout the series, of course, mostly involving when Pyrrha died, and when we see the statue of Pyrrha in Volume 6 bringing back all those memories. Things like that are really emotional for the series, but it's been very rare in the actual series itself where I've just felt my heart drop and felt the gravity of the situation that we're in. Even in Beacon Academy, probably the situation that would describe that feeling the best, I didn't feel it as much as I think I should have. Now that's mostly, I'm guessing, in part because Rooster Teeth was making a drastic change with the series, going from fairly lighthearted in Volumes 1 and 2 to actually showing people dying on screen and things like that. Now, Beacon Academy was being overrun by Grimm and things like that, so they, people are dying left, right, and center in this giant attack. Yes, there are a lot of huntsmen and huntresses, but there are also a lot of civilians that are just there to witness the Vital Fighting Festival, a lot of which would have perished in that attack. And yet, that wasn't shown. We didn't see people constantly being carried off by Grimm. We didn't see people lying dead in the streets. That'd be a little bit too graphic for the point that the RWBY series was at in Rooster Teeth's perspective, and I completely agree with that. However, it kind of does take away from the gravity of the situation. When it comes to this mission that Team Coffee was on, though, in this book, especially after, 6 volumes of RWBY, they didn't take as many liberties with that. They were a little bit more graphic. Now, not as graphic as they could have been, but still, you'll see when I get into the description of the mission. Now, the mission that Team Coffee was on is in a Vale settlement called Lower Cairn, and this settlement had been overrun by Grimm. There was a distress signal sent out, and Team Coffee was sent to investigate, help the refugees escape, and pretty much just extract them. Should be a simple mission, right? Well, we pick up with Team Coffee 10 days after they had been sent on this mission. Mission should have only taken 3, hence, why a week late and everything. So we don't see, the entirety of the mission, but we see the important part. Now, when they had gotten to Lower Cairn, the village was gone. We've seen villages that have been overrun by Grimm and left abandoned and, destroyed, but the buildings are still standing. Take Kuroyuri, for example, in Volume 4, it had been overrun by Grimm. We saw the Grimm overrun it in Ren's past, and it was just pretty much left in shambles. But no, Kuroyuri was gone, except for a few sparse stone buildings. It was flattened. Something that Team Coffee had never seen before. Such destruction on such a scale was insane for them to see. This was a village of 200 people. Now, they had been there for 10 days. Since they had only planned for 3, their rations were running low, they hadn't gotten much sleep, there were Grimm everywhere. And they were trying to avoid conflict with them as much as possible, because if they got overrun, well, they would end up being killed. So they've been out in the mountains just trying to scrounge around and find survivors from this settlement. And they've had no luck. Fox, using a semblance of telepathy, has been able to faintly sense the minds of some of the survivors, or some people, and he's been trying to track them down, but having difficulty due to the mountains and the trees and everything causing interference. Apparently that happens in Vale too, with the buildings and things like that. But with tensions being so high, Coco's saying, maybe your semblance is just on the fritz, what's going on? Grimm are still attacking. There was even a point where Velvet got taken by surprise by a creep. Yatsuhashi did take it out, but with a strike strong enough to crack the ground in an 8-foot radius around him. Again, not as much, I'm guessing, as was in the end of Volume 2, where he shattered the ground, but still enough to send Velvet flying backwards, and she actually took a slight blow to the head, and you know, Coco started yelling at Velvet for being taken by surprise by a Grimm, yelling at Yatsuhashi for not being able to control his strength, and all things that everyone knows, and tensions are getting high. Coco's bossing people around, people aren't happy with it. Needless to say, the team is in a slight bit of disarray. However, Fox is able to get a better read on the people that he's sensing, and he actually realizes they're underground. They had fallen into a cave or had been in a crevice or something, and that's why he couldn't sense them, because, you know, the ground is interfering with it. So Velvet, of course being injured, isn't really able to go down the crack that they find in the ground to go to these people, and so Coco does. She goes down, she's using her scroll for light, because she's actually afraid of the dark. We get a little bit of a reveal about her past, that when she was playing hide and seek with her two siblings, she kind of got locked in a cupboard and wasn't found for a couple hours. Pretty traumatizing for a kid, but still not a situation that she likes being in. She goes down and uses her scroll for light, as I mentioned. She finds a family, a father, a man and wife, and their 4 kids, 1 boy and 3 girls. Now, they are really hungry. They've been out there for over a week as well without food or shelter, and the reality sinks in to Coco that at this point, these 6 people, this one family, is all that's left of this settlement of 200 people. That's pretty insane. Now, she gets into the cave, she finds the people, gives them what little supplies that she has left, and is going to lead them out. She sends back through Fox's telepathy that, you know, I'm not going to be able to get back up. She had to drop down 10 feet to get into the cave, and so the rest of her team goes around to find another exit. And so they do, and as Coco is leading them through, you know, she's been using the light on her scroll, so it starts to die. And it ends up dying, so they do have to go a little bit slower, but the rest of her team is able to find another entrance to the cave and start going in. However, Coco, upon seeing a light, says, "Oh, I see you guys," and heads towards that light. Now, the rest of her team sends back through Fox's telepathy, we aren't using a light, we have, you know, Velvet's senses and Fox's telepathy, that's what's guiding them. So the light is something that we've seen before. You remember that thing back in Volume 1 that made Jean scream like a little girl? The Deathstalker's stinger that glows a nice golden amber? Yeah, that. As Coco enters a cavern underground, there's a Deathstalker there waiting for her. And she's kind of shocked by it at first, so when it strikes at her, she was about to get hit. The man, however, pushes her out of the way and takes a shot right to the leg, pinning him to the ground. So already one of the civilians, the survivors, is pretty injured. Now, Coco does fire off her gun, but she's underground and is causing more trouble than good at this point, and she didn't enhance her bullets, so had she used her semblance hype to enhance her bullets, well, then the entire cave would have come down. Luckily, however, the rest of her team catches up with her at that point, and they start taking on the Deathstalker. Well, they're able to free the man from the grasp, or the stinger at least, and he's able to hobble away with the help of his wife, but with that, they're able to kind of regroup. Coco says, "Screw it, everyone just start running on my signal, I'm gonna use my Gatling gun at full force and just end this Deathstalker." So she does that. Rips apart the Deathstalker, but also the cave that they're in, so they all book it towards the exit and are able to make it outside. However, once they do, Coco comes out, sees Velvet and everyone else kind of standing in the middle of a river, surrounded by Ursai. So that little commotion drew more Grimm. The panic and fear, now they're surrounded. And as they're slowly starting to fight them off, Velvet, Coco, Yatsuhashi, Fox, but the family tries to make a beeline through a gap in the Grimm. The father, however, the man, the husband, is on a hobbled leg. He trips and falls, and an Ursa, I should say, grabs him in its jaws and crushes him to death. First time we've seen, or in this case read, of a civilian just dying from a Grimm right in front of people, being crushed to death. So yeah, this causes the family to start screaming and panicking. The children start crying after seeing their father killed right in front of their eyes. And then, guess what else comes? They find out why the village was flattened and completely destroyed. A Goliath. Those Grimm that we saw back in Volume 2 when RWBY and Oobleck were out there on their mission, and they saw those giant elephant Grimm that were walking around. Oobleck said, you know, don't pay any mind, they've lived for hundreds of years. They don't care about little people. They don't care about the single humans that are around them. The sniper rifle that you have won't do much good against it. They are too powerful, and they are just waiting and biding their time. They are intelligent. And now one of them is right here. The family, of course, freaking out about that, books it back into the cave, where they think it's safe. However, the Goliath steps on the cave and crushes all of them. An entire family of a mother and 4 kids were just crushed to death. Now at this point, luckily Dr. Port shows up, or Professor Port, I should say, shows up in the ship and is distracting the Goliath. You know, he had called before and chewed Coco out for not calling and checking in for 10 days, and he sent an extraction team right away as he could see that the team was kind of in distress, even though they said they wanted to continue the mission and try to find survivors. Good thing he came anyways, because they were in a pretty dire situation. Everyone starts to make a run for the ship. Coco says there's still time, we can save them, we need to go dig them out of the cave. But Fox, you know, with the telepathy, being able to sense minds, he tells her, I can't sense them anymore. They're gone. And with that, Coco actually resolves herself to stay and fight the Goliath by herself. Now, her hype bullets may actually be able to do something against this Goliath. However, alone, she's not going to last long because there's Ursa and Beowulfs and everything around them. So Yatsuhashi grabs her and everyone books it onto the ship and takes off. They failed their mission to save the people of Lower Cairn. The one family of 6 that they did find ended up dying in front of them, under their protection. The father crushed in an Ursa's jaws right in front of his family. And then his wife and 4 kids crushed in a cave. Reading that and the description that they had in After the Fall made my heart sink. Something that I've actually never felt to that extent in the RWBY series itself. Now, that mission is the darkest mission that we know of that happened at Beacon Academy. There are probably others, of course, that have happened and ended in similar ways that they just couldn't save the civilians and things like that, but this is the darkest one that we've heard about. And it gives a whole lot of motivation for Team Coffee throughout this book. After they get back from their mission, you know, Professor Goodwitch calls Velvet aside after she had that little encounter with, after Velvet and Blake had their little conversation. Goodwitch calls Velvet to Ozpin's office to get kind of an explanation as to what happened. Ozpin tells her, you know, I'm not mad, I just want to know what happened. These things do happen. We can't save everyone, we just save as many as we can. Tell me what happened. The rest of her team, though, didn't realize that Velvet was called to Ozpin's office, and once they find out, as they're in the cafeteria at the time, they all barge into the headmaster's office. You know, something that you generally don't do in any school setting. But they barge in and are taking responsibility for it. It's not Velvet's fault. It's all of ours. You know, we all share in this burden. And, you know, Velvet was kind of surprised that they were all there, but this is when the team grows a lot closer. They are there to protect each other. They become a closer team, and most importantly, they vow to do whatever they can to avoid leaving anyone else behind, to avoid failing the way they did in this mission. That gives them so much motivation throughout After the Fall and the mission that they are on. And that gives all the more reason as to why Team Coffee fought so hard to protect Beacon. When Beacon was falling and they saw their friends being attacked right around them, they fought harder than almost anyone else to defend the school. Yes, everyone else, the huntsmen and huntresses in training, as well as the professors, were all fighting to defend their school with everything they had, but even 2 weeks after everyone else was evacuated, and the rest of the professors were staying to defend the school, Team Coffee was still there, fighting and defending. Other people had been evacuated to other schools to continue their training, but Team Coffee stayed. They only left because Professor Goodwitch insisted that they do, that they would do more good going and becoming trained huntsmen and huntresses to protect future generations and then maybe come back to help the school. And so they did. But Team Coffee has such resolve throughout all of this, and it gives such a credence to the team. As I mentioned, I'm sure there are other missions like this at Beacon Academy and other stories all throughout Remnant that end in similar circumstances or are as dark as this. Now, I personally kind of like when a situation is supposed to have that weight to it, that it is supposed to be devastating for the people who are experiencing it, and for the reader or viewer, in the case of the RWBY series, is supposed to be able to kind of empathize with that and feel some of the gravity of that situation. I like what they did in this After the Fall book, how they explained the gravity of the situation, and I kind of hope that the RWBY series continues this, that it does get, you know, a little bit darker when it needs to be, and they nail the lighthearted scenes pretty damn well. They nail the emotional scenes, you know, seeing the statue of Pyrrha, things like that. The reunion between the entire Team RWBY and everything like that was a great scene. They nail those scenes, but I think when it comes to the scenes that should be very devastating for the people to see, they can make it, for lack of a better word, a little bit more graphic. But let me know what you guys think about the mission that Team Coffee had in Lower Cairn. Do you think that the series should continue in a direction where they're a little bit more graphic about the things that should really weigh on the viewer, and things along those lines? How do you feel about Team Coffee and how they've improved from their mission? Do you think that they could have actually saved the family? Personally, I think their situation was pretty set in stone once the Goliath showed up. That they were lucky to survive themselves, and they did try their best. But again, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. How have you liked After the Fall already? Are you looking forward to the follow-up book Before the Dawn? And, you know, all those sorts of things. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you can see more videos like this. And I'll see you guys in the next one.